The following program is made possible with support from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation.
Welcome to Science Goes to the Movies, a look at the stories of science and how they change our culture. I'm Heather Berlin.
And I'm Faith Saley. Science Goes to the Movies is all about movies, TV shows, pop culture, and science.
Today, we're going to talk about physics and The Flash.
The Flash and his alter ego, Barry Allen, first appeared in a 1956 DC comic. The character died in 1985 and stayed dead for nearly 23 years. Now he's back on TV on the CW in a series appropriately titled The Flash.
What if I'm not a hero? What if I'm just some guy who was struck by lightning?
I don't think that bolt of lightning struck you, Barry. I think it chose you because you can inspire people, watching over your city like a guardian angel, making a difference, saving people in a flash.
We're delighted today to be joined by David E. Kaplan, professor of physics and astronomy at Johns Hopkins. He's also a producer and one of the stars of the film Particle Fever, a thrilling documentary about the real-life particle accelerator at CERN, also known as the Large Hadron Collider. Welcome.
Thanks.
What does the E stand for, David E. Kaplan?
There are a lot of David Kaplans in physics, so it's just to distinguish
Really?
us. I'm E, yes.
You're the David E.
Well, that's
Kaplan.
very kind of you. The others will not agree
You
with
still
you.
didn't tell me what it stands for.
Oh, Elazar.
What? That's why you're on this show. That's crazy. That's amazing.
What? I don't even know what Elazar, what does that even refer, where does that name come from?
It's my,
That's
my
science fiction.
dad was Israeli. Actually, it does. There's two Z's in it. It's Razzle spelled backwards.
That's your superhero name from now on.
All right, Elazar. The inciting incident in the updated Flash is an accident at a particle accelerator in fictional Central City. Kudos to the CW and writers for including cutting-edge science in their show. So, David, Elazar, Kaplan,
Yes.
the particle accelerator in the Flash that starts off this whole thing is above ground, and it's the size of a football stadium. How does that compare to the size of the Large Hadron Collider?
Well, the Large Hadron Collider is enormous. It's funny that in a show like that the actual particle accelerator would be smaller than they are in real life. The one in Geneva is almost 17 miles around.
Wow. 17 miles?
Yes.
Is that the largest machine built? Is that the
I
largest?
think people could argue things, but as a physical device, yes, it's the largest machine built by human beings.
Cool.
Back to The Flash, and spoilers to come if you're not caught up at the end of season 1. The Flash runs so fast, he time travels, and in doing so, he tears a hole in the multiverse that allows creatures from another universe to spill into our world all throughout season 2. And that is great fantasy. David, if filmmakers want, and storytellers wanted to tie their stories closely to the real physics of the multiverse theory, what would they need to understand about the multiverse?
With the multiverse, since it's not really a theory in physics, it's more like a framework. The truth is we don't completely understand how the multiverse works, how it should work. So that's great fodder for a science fiction writer because we can't argue with them. We don't quite know yet. Okay, so one option for the multiverse is that there are, and I'll just say these words and they'll sound goofy, but I'm just saying, there are extra dimensions in space, and that our experience of space-time is a slice of that extra dimensional space. And there are other slices in the extra dimensional space for which other creatures or other objects live on. And they have their own set of rules, they're made of their own things, like dark matter is made of its own thing, it's not made of atoms. And yet, they live in different places in the extra dimension, but if you look through both surfaces, they're actually living on top of each other. So in a sense, you could imagine that what goes on in this room, there's also a whole bunch of other stuff happening in this space, but it's in the other universe, and it's happening simultaneously. And our only way to interact with it is via gravitation, because we all feel gravity. And so if a wormhole opens up, You can imagine things going from the parallel universe here. But also that means there's, in principle, a way of detecting that stuff. And that stuff could be floating around the room, and maybe, if it is solid objects, yet it passes right through us, gravity detectors could see those things. And the technology is not far from actually being able to do something like that.
This really blows me away, I have to say. But it's so out there that, is it any more out there to think that, when people believe in energy, like life after death or existing in another multi-universe, like, is there anything to that? I mean, my quest has always been this, can we live on, after, and is there a physical explanation that could make that so?
You're the neuroscientist, so consciousness is not, this is not my table, but...
Just make it so. Well, I mean, just the idea, this is so outrageous, the kinds of things that you're explaining with these multiverse. Could we exist in another universe? Could consciousness remain?
Yeah, I don't know. Consciousness, for me, as a physicist, I say, consciousness is an emergent phenomenon, which is there's a whole bunch of particles, they all collect together, and through lots of beautiful processes, a brain and body is produced, and an after effect is consciousness. And so then it's all in there. But for me, the beauty is the pieces themselves. The pieces don't forget. Information is not lost in a quantum mechanical system. So would I describe that as the high level consciousness can then be transformed to something else? No, I probably would not. But I think as a human, we're all very self-addicted to our own consciousness, like me, I, identity. And so I don't think about consciousness as, then the consciousness can move through to this other thing.
So our consciousness might not exist because it's a specific relationship between particles that causes it, but perhaps the particles that it's made of in some way, shape, or form could exist in other forms.
Particles are a description of what the fundamental pieces are, but they're waves. They have, there are other descriptions where it's not so clear-cut, that they're individual objects with individual positions and locations and experiences. So from there, it's somebody needs to write a script.
Which is a great segue back into The Flash.
Yes.
Because in The Flash, in CW's version of The Flash, Barry Allen seems to live for at least 100 years. Now, how does speed affect time for Barry Allen?
Well, that's an easy one, and that's can be very accurate even, because Barry Allen is running very fast, so in special relativity, he goes into a different reference frame, we call it. And when he is in that reference frame, if somebody could actually see his watch as he was running that fast, they would notice that his watch is moving slower than their own watch. And it's because time itself turns out to be relative. And there's a simple reason for that, but then it has deep implications. The simple reason is that the laws of physics seem to be the same whether you're standing still or moving at a constant velocity. That's one form of relativity. So if you're in a spaceship, the spaceship is moving at a constant velocity, not accelerating. Everything you do is exactly the same. The laws are the same. If you're in a train and it's moving at a constant velocity, you can bounce a ball on the ground. You don't have to keep track of the velocity of the train. That's one rule. The second rule is that there is one special law of physics, which is the speed of light is the same for every observer in an inertial frame. So whether you're on the train and the train is moving at a constant speed, or in a spaceship, or just sitting still, compared to those, when you turn on a flashlight and you measure the speed of light, you say, light is moving that speed. And that's true about the person on the train, the person in the spaceship, and the flash. So now you say, okay, go, and the flash starts running, and you turn on the flashlight, and the light goes faster than the flash, because nothing can go faster than light. So the flash is trying to catch up to the light beam, and the light beam is going the speed of light, and I'm watching, I'm like, well, the flash is keeping up pretty good, but can't actually catch it. But the flash is looking at the beam of light, and then you'd think, well, the flash sees the beam of light is going much slower, because he's almost, able to keep up with it. But that can't be true, because it violates a law of physics. So for the flash, that beam of light must be going the speed of light. But if it's going slower, how is that possible? It's because time is going slower. The flash sees time at a different rate than we do. And so as that beam of light goes, it's going the speed of light. No way I can catch that thing. It will always go the speed of light. But that means time is not going at a fundamental rate for him and us. It has to be different.
Let's talk about gravity. The flash repeatedly expresses the occurrence of time travel with images of liquid disobeying the laws of gravity. So there'll be like coffee rising up out of a cup. If time travel were possible, would it mess with gravity?
Oh my God. Well, you see,
We ask the hard questions on
yeah,
the show.
I mean, time travel is rough because time travel forward is trivial. You just run fast, and then you can skip ahead, right? So if you run really close to the speed of light, then your watch 10 minutes has passed, but for everybody else 100 years has passed. So that's an easy trip to the future, but then you can't go back. So then how do you go back? Well, people speculate about universes, space-times, where there are paths you can take where you actually return to where you were not only in space but in time. Those are called closed time-like curves. And every universe that's been constructed mathematically like that is unstable. So we don't actually have any physics description of any way of going back in time. But it's related to gravity in that sense. If you really want things to go back in time and stuff, we don't. I have no idea. No, we don't know. But yeah, probably it messes with gravity. That's probably true.
All right, I have to admit something. At the end of your movie, Particle Fever, the Higgs boson is discovered.
Oh, spoiler!
And watching Peter Higgs dab his eyes at the end of the movie, I totally understand how important it is on a human level, but can you explain why this is so important on a scientific level? The discovery of a Higgs boson particle.
Each incremental discovery is important because it's another part of the bigger picture of what reality is. That's all we were trying to figure out, is what is reality. And discovering the Higgs was a confirmation of a very old theory that had a lot of indirect evidence. It was a measurement of the mass of that particle, which gave us now hints about what may be at the deeper level. It may say something about dark matter, it may not. So the discovery of the Higgs in the prosaic sense is just another bit of information for us. But we have so few bits of the list of the underlying laws of all of nature that every one we get, we just pounce on and we're hungry for, and we want to figure out what's coming next. What is this telling us? I can't tell you what the Higgs is for. I can't tell you what people are going to use it for. I can't tell you if it's going to be critical for the next big discovery, because I don't know. I don't know what any of those things are in the future. It's very dangerous to make predictions, especially about the future.
How does it affect humans? I mean, so we find these particles, and it's, at an intellectual level, really interesting, but will it actually really affect our human experience, knowing this information?
The day-to-day life?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. One question is, why do we do fundamental science? Why is it important to do these things? You can think about a single human being and you say, well, at the first level I want to survive, and that's an instinctive response to life. And at the next level you want to thrive. Intuitively, that's just true. You want to be healthy, you want the people around you to be healthy, you want happiness. But what's the third level? The third level is aspiration. We are inspired by certain things. We take careers or we take leaps of faith because we're inspired by it. Now, if you look at the entire human race, those three levels apply too. What's at the top level? It's pure knowledge. This is a public good. Anything we discover is simply true about the reality we have inherited and that we exist in. There's nothing else there. You can start to put numbers, oh, you spend this much money, yes, but there are spin-offs. This is an irrelevant discussion in a sense, because what we leave is a truth that will live forever as long as humans exist and they can read books or look at the information we have. We have gone somewhere where no one has gone before. And that's something that a life or a race or a community can do and leave.
Did America blow its chance to be a world leader in science when it abandoned its own 1980s particle accelerator that they had in Texas? Oh, there was a project in Texas. Right,
the SSC. Yep.
Okay.
So does that mean there's only one particle collider in the world?
The LHC is the biggest collider. There was a smaller one outside of Chicago. It was called the Tevatron, and it was at a lab called Fermilab. And they just shut it down in 2011 because there was this bigger machine going and it would blow its socks off, so there was no way.
But when they shut it down, does that mean there's this huge tunnel around
Yeah, there's a
Chicago that
ring.
anybody could hang out in?
Yeah, at Fermilab, it's partially above ground. It's not deep
Even
underground.
better.
It's a cool place, actually. I guess you could go in the tunnel. I don't know. If you knew somebody, you could probably get in there and maybe film a movie or something.
The movie Particle Fever ends with the discovery that the Higgs weighs 125 giga-electron volts,
Yes.
right? And it seems hugely important. If Particle Fever were a
Right.
superhero movie, they ending on that number, they just nailed the, stay tuned for a sequel cliffhanger.
It's a
So,
cliffhanger.
right. So why is that number, that 125 giga-electron volts, so important? What does it represent? Why is it so important?
We wanted to make sure if we wanted to make a sequel, we could. And so this was a negotiation with CERN to come up with a number that nobody had predicted yet.
Really?
No.
Oh.
So,
I didn't believe that for a second. I was going to go to the sequel. I have my popcorn ready.
So no. The real reason, when I started making the movie, I had some notes and said, oh, what if the mass of the Higgs is somewhere over here and maybe it'll be confusing, but what's actually happening. I didn't think there would be so much fervor about it. The truth is that because of the cancellation of the SSE, for example, the entire community,
SSE.
the superconducting super collider.
The
This was
Texas.
the big
Texas
collider
one.
in
Got it.
Texas that got canceled. Partially because of that, and partially simply because it's so hard to build these things. We have an entire generation of theorists whose theories have not been tested. And they thought they would be tested long ago, and then as time went on, we're talking about an entire career until a single piece of information comes out. And so that piece of information, you can bet everybody is just, hanging on the edge of their seat. Oh, what's it going to be? Because whatever that number is, it's an implication for everybody's individual theories or ideas of what could be happening. It's a little hint. It's not a big, if we had the collider long ago and it had a higher energy, we could see more stuff. Okay, that's very interesting, 125. But it's the only bit of information we get. And we're talking about people like my mentor in the movie, Savas Dimopoulos. He wrote down his theory in 1981. And 2012 is when he gets the first little bit of information as to which way it's going to go. So the number means a lot only because of that little implication about the theories that come next after the standard model, the deeper theory of space-time and et cetera.
All right. I need your help with this. Okay. I see reflected all around me both, things that are both chaotic and orderly, right? There's the science of fractals and the work of Adrian Duati and the Mandelbrot set, and anything that grows in someone's garden seems both random and orderly. And I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I keep them contained and alive, but that is both random and chaotic and
Sure.
orderly. So why can't we have a universe based on supersymmetry that is also a multiverse, right? Because you say supersymmetry is order and a multiverse is chaos?
You're assuming that our viewers here have all seen Particle Fever, which is very kind of you.
Duh.
But,
Right.
but yes, there was sort of two classifications of ideas that could have been underlying the Higgs. Supersymmetry is, in some sense, old-fashioned. It's more structure, more symmetry, explains numbers because they're all related to each other in some deeper way. And so supersymmetry, for lots of other reasons, was people's best bet of what was there. And so it's a symmetry, and it does mean that there's more structure, and it's the kind of thing we're used to. The other possibility is that the multiverse exists, and that something like the Higgs, where did the Higgs come from? Why is the Higgs in our universe and at this mass, etc.? The multiverse could suggest that the existence of the Higgs itself and its mass is totally random. And the only reason we see it is because there are lots of other parts of the universe where the Higgs comes in at a very natural value with lots of other structure, etc., but we don't live there because in all of those places life can't exist for some reason. But here, there's some crazy tuning and cancellation of parameters and some random reason why the Higgs is at this weird value its mass, with nothing else, no other physics, and it's just there, and we're there in that part of the multiverse because that's the only place where structure exists. And so we're biased by our own existence, that if the universe is so much bigger than just the observable universe, and that other parts of the universe, the numbers are different, the laws are different, we're going to, of course, live in the one that has the most structure, the most complexity, or at least the ones that allow observers, us, to exist. And so we have a data set of one. We see our universe. If there's a multiverse, we don't know if it's a typical universe or super atypical, but biased by our existence. And so
This is so blowing my mind. Come
on, I feel like we're about to get to the climax. This is
Sorry,
like very
go ahead,
exciting.
Go ahead. We're ready. You got us. Let's go.
So what that means is that in our observable universe, there may be simply things we cannot answer. We cannot see the rest of the theory because it doesn't exist here. It exists in other universes. And the underlying theory could be deep and symmetrical. It could even be supersymmetric. But we do not have access to that supersymmetry because that supersymmetry is at a completely different energy scale, which seems to be totally distinct from where the Higgs came from. And so it's not that one theory could exist, the other one does, or they could both exist. It could be that it comes all from randomness. It could be that it comes all from symmetry, or it could be a mixture of both. We don't know. The question is, as finite observers, are we ever going to have access to it? And that was the deeper question that we were hoping to answer, and that we were left with a cliffhanger.
You know, so many things you say end in an ellipsis or a question mark.
Yes. Welcome to physics. Neuroscience too.
Yeah, it's the same.
Bigger question marks, I think.
Yeah.
In the Star Wars saga, Han Solo famously makes the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. And J.J. Abrams doubled down on Lucas's mistake when Rey says of the Millennium Falcon, "This is the ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs." In our world, parsecs are a measure of distance, not time, and the distance between two fixed points is unchanging. In other words, there are always the identical amount of parsecs between point A and point B.
Sure.
But if you were in a multiverse, Ish. All right, well, we'll put a pin in that. Here's my question. If you were in a multiverse and you could move between point A, that is in one universe, and point B, that is in another universe, would distances be variable? And, I mean, i.e., is George Lucas a secret science genius?
So again, I'll answer the last question first. No.
Okay.
But he's a genius in other ways, obviously. So there are many excuses for the whole 12 parsec thingy. If you travel at very high speeds, there's something called length contraction. So lengths, physical lengths, actually are different when you're in higher speeds. Just like time is different, length is also different at higher speeds. And so the contraction of length could be some sort of measure of how close to light speed they're going. And maybe that's actually what's happening. And if that's the case, then that would be, yeah, Lucas is a genius. But I suspect he just took some physics word and plopped it in there. The other possibility, now the problem with that, of course, is that 12 parsecs is still something like 30-odd light years. And that means Han Solo would be taking 30 years of his own time on his watch to do the Kessel Run, which he doesn't look, I mean, he is aged certainly for the new movie, but he doesn't look like he's been doing that regularly.
Right.
So you really have to screw with the laws of physics in order to get this thing to work. So perhaps 12 parsecs is related to, and I'm just assuming it's all true, everything's true. So perhaps 12 parsecs is related to the fact that when the Millennium Falcon goes light speed, but it's not really light speed, what it's doing is it's able to detect the quantum fluctuations of the space-time, which produce random wormholes. And the random wormhole trajectory is something that the Millennium Falcon is much better than most ships because it can find the shortest path between 2 points by zipping in and out of the multiverse and then landing back in the normal universe.
Given the hints that the writers have been dropping about the way the characters travel from planet to planet, is Star Wars a multiverse?
I mean, the main problem Star Wars has is a time problem. Because they go insane distances, they do it very quickly, and so people should age very differently. You know, the movie Interstellar, like, took that to heart. And so, like, you had to make a very serious decision. I don't want to get too close to a black hole because then all my friends will be dead, or we can only spend 10 minutes there, or something like that. So that was sort of brilliant use of that issue that comes up in gravity and in physics. They totally circumvent that in Star Wars, and you have to if you want that sort of mythology. Multiverse, I guess, you know, that they're zipping through wormholes and say, oh, here's this place. Maybe, I mean, I guess it could be that if there are these wormholes, which you never get to see in Star Wars, but if there are wormholes, perhaps, like I said, this room is filled with all kinds of other stuff and we just don't see it because it's on another plane in the extra dimension. Maybe, too, you pass through the wormhole and there's actually stuff that's much closer to you than you would expect, but you need to open the wormhole, or you need to do something. You need a special ship that can get you through it. And that's why they can beat the huge cruisers.
I wish we could slow time down, David, but we can't. This is all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming by today.
Sure.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget to check us out on the web at CUNY.tv under the Science tab, where you'll find past shows, additional content, and a link to our app.